Okay, so you know that feeling when you're really trying to look ahead, step into something new, but it's like your feet are just stuck in the past.
Hmm. Like wading through treacle.
Exactly. Maybe it's, I don't know, an old argument playing on loop or thinking about a chance you missed or just
Mm.
just this feeling you can't shake off what's already done.
Yeah, it's such a common human thing, isn't it? This
Mm.
tension between wanting to move forward and, well, feeling chained to what happened before.
It really is, and it's fascinating how that plays
Well,
out.
the source material we looked at points out something interesting. We're actually designed for change. Physically, our cells regenerate constantly.
Right, that 7-year cycle thing.
Yeah, roughly.
Yeah.
But the point is, mentally and emotionally, that change process is happening too,
Hmm.
often even faster.
Yeah.
But getting it started, feeling that shift,
Yeah.
that can be the hard part.
And that's precisely what we're getting into today. This whole kind of complex process of really letting go, releasing the past, and finding a way to, recover emotionally.
We've dug into some really insightful material on this, stuff that helps explain why it feels so tough, but also offers some practical ways to think about breaking free.
Think of this as like your shortcut to grasping these big ideas without having to sift through everything yourself. We're pulling out the key bits.
Yeah, our mission really is to boil down the essential knowledge from the source
Yeah.
to help you get a clearer handle on how to navigate this whole release and recovery thing, untangle those old threads.
Okay, so first, big idea, this constant state of change we're in. You mentioned the physical body.
Right. And it's crucial to see that our minds, our emotions, they're also always shifting, adapting. It's like fundamental to being alive. It's not static.
So why the struggle then? Why do we cling so tightly, especially to the painful stuff? What makes us hold on to things that are clearly making us unhappy?
Well, that brings us straight to resistance, doesn't it? The source argues that a lot of our suffering comes from fighting this natural flow, this evolution.
Mm.
We hang on to old patterns, emotions we haven't dealt with. The source calls it baggage, which is pretty apt.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we're basically dragging the past right into the present and then projecting it onto the future, too.
Right. It's like trying to swim upstream holding a heavy bag. Just makes everything harder, which kind of leads to that common advice, just let go.
Ah, yes, just let it
But
go.
the source really pushes back on that, doesn't it?
It does, and I think this is really key. Telling someone or yourself to just let go often doesn't work because it ignores how deep those attachments can be. They're often tied to really basic needs, safety, love, security.
Yeah, you can't just flip a switch on those things. Like
Yeah.
telling someone who's terrified not to be scared doesn't work
Yeah,
that way.
exactly. And the source has that great analogy, the white elephant. Try not to think about a white elephant.
And suddenly that's all you can see.
Precisely. Forcing it, trying to suppress it, can actually make the attachment stronger. It's counterintuitive, but it happens.
Okay, so if brute force, sheer willpower isn't the answer, what does the source suggest is a better way?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. It flips the script a bit. It suggests letting go isn't really the first step. It's
Uh,
more like a consequence, a result of taking active steps towards building something new, a new life, new focus, new experiences.
okay, so focus on building, not just demolishing the old thing.
Exactly. And it stresses that feeling, the emotions that come with that sadness, grief, anger,
Yeah.
whatever that's part of it. You
Yep.
gotta allow that. Crying, grieving, it's necessary.
And there's this catalyst moment the source talks about, realizing you can't find peace in the ruins.
Right. That's the turning point. You have to actively start building something else, something engaging, immersive.
Like realizing you can't rebuild a collapsed house just by sorting through the bricks. You need a new blueprint, a new foundation.
Hmm. And as you get absorbed in building that new life,
Mm-hmm.
your focus just naturally starts to shift away from the past. It happens gradually.
The source also makes that point about loss, sometimes waking up parts of us we didn't know were there, like sparking unexpected growth.
Yeah, loss can be a powerful catalyst sometimes.
Hmm.
And the healing isn't instant. It's noticing, huh, I didn't think about that for an hour today. Then it's a day, then a week. It expands.
And eventually, the stuff you thought would break you might actually look back and feel grateful, not for the pain itself, but for the strength it forced you to find.
That's the idea, transforming your relationship with the past. Now, this leads into a really practical technique the source mentions, sort of a psychological trick for dealing with old memories.
Okay, let's get into that. It sounds intriguing.
So the idea is that these unresolved emotional experiences aren't just thoughts. They get stored physically in the body. and they can actually block growth.
Right. And the strong feelings often link back to needs we had then or maybe still have now.
Exactly. So the technique involves consciously going back into that painful memory, closing your eyes, finding where you feel that discomfort physically. The Force calls it a portal.
A portal. Okay.
Yeah, like an entry point. And then you mentally bring your current self, your wiser, healed, older self into that past scene.
Ah, okay. So you're intervening in the memory.
Sort of. You're superimposing a new narrative. Your present self offers wisdom, guidance, reassurance to your younger self who's struggling in that moment.
So, like, if it was a breakup memory, your current self might tell your younger self, you are worthy, this pain won't last, better things are coming.
Precisely. Or if it was feeling inadequate, you might offer specific advice you know now about building confidence. Try this. Focus on that.
And the goal isn't to change what happened.
No, you can't change the past, but you can change how it lives inside you now. You're trying to release the old emotional charge attached to that memory
Mm.
and like reattach that younger part of you to the safety and perspective of your present self.
So, changing the perspective alters the present, untangling those old knots that distort how we see the past.
Yeah, it frees up so much energy. Energy you were using to keep replaying that old hurt, you can now invest it in building the life you want now.
Which connects to why we sometimes get stuck replaying things. It's not always about wanting to go back.
Right. Sometimes it's just that the experience was so impactful, so significant, and we haven't fully processed or integrated what it meant to us.
And that brings up how society sometimes handles this stuff, right? The source mentions the limited time we often get.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Society often has this unspoken timeline, doesn't it? After a big loss or change, there's pressure to kind of bounce back quickly.
Move on, get over it.
Exactly. But looking okay on the outside doesn't mean the internal healing work is done. You can't just leave yourself behind.
True. The source says those unaddressed experiences will come back up somehow.
They always do. So feeling stuck isn't necessarily a sign you want to be back there. It's often just a sign of how deeply something affected you.
And the source actually says feeling those things after trauma is
Yeah.
healthy.
Yeah, it's a normal response. Being able to still recall it, feel it, that actually suggests you're capable of healing, willing to engage with it. It's not a sign of weakness.
Okay. Now, another big theme was about letting go of unrealistic expectations. That one really hit home for me.
Oh, yeah. That whole idea that we can only be happy after we fix everything, after we achieve the goal, after we lose the weight, after we get the perfect job.
I'll be happy when. That's a constant deferral of happiness.
And the source argues that thinking basically tells your present self you're not good enough yet. It reinforces dissatisfaction,
So the real shift is what? Accepting where you are now.
pretty much.
Hmm.
Finding contentment now exactly as you are, even while you're still working towards things. Embracing the imperfections.
Like those nature examples, the source used fault lines, creating mountains, stars imploding to create new elements.
Right. Imperfection is often where the power and beauty lie. Life isn't about hitting some perfect, rigid target we set for ourselves. It's messier, more organic than that.
Which flows nicely into that other idea. What leaves your path is actually clearing your path.
I like that one. It's about trusting the process a bit more, maybe. Understanding the difference between what truly fits and what doesn't.
The source talked about how much energy we can waste trying to force something that's just wrong for us. A job, a relationship.
Yeah, you can push and pull and try to control it, but if it's not fundamentally aligned,
Yeah.
it's likely going to fall away eventually anyway.
And there's a different feeling to it, isn't there? The source mentioned clarity versus confusion.
Exactly. When something is right, there's often a sense of flow, maybe, or at least underlying rightness. When it's wrong, there's that constant nagging confusion, that internal conflict.
Which we sometimes mistake for passion, right? Like, oh, I'm fighting for this. It must be important.
Yeah, or we fall in love with the potential of something, the fantasy, instead of the reality.
Guilty as charged sometimes.
I think we all are. But the source suggests that deep down, we usually know when something isn't right. We just ignore that knowing out of fear.
Fear of losing
Yeah.
security, or what we think is security.
Right. But the irony is, clinging on to the wrong thing often makes us feel more insecure, more unsettled inside. It creates constant friction.
Okay, this focus on the body and our intuition leads us naturally into the whole topic of trauma recovery. The source goes deep on this.
Yeah, and the key point is, trauma isn't just psychological, it's physical. It gets
Yeah.
literally stored in the body. It keeps that fight or flight system switched on.
That survival mode.
Exactly. The source defines trauma fundamentally as losing that basic feeling of safety. And until that safety is restored, your whole worldview can shift.
How so?
Hypersensitivity, overthinking everything, maybe overreacting, taking things personally. Your brain basically goes into like threat detection mode constantly.
Yeah, the source mentioned the brain actually rewires temporarily to look for danger. Makes it really hard to just move on.
Absolutely. And it can sometimes lead to feeling like a victim, helpless. Exposure therapy is mentioned as one way to slowly, carefully reteach the brain that it can cope, that the world isn't all dangerous. Rebuilding control.
And it mentions social ties and resilience before the trauma make a difference.
Having strong support systems, a history of resilience that can apparently help buffer the effects, maybe even lead to growth afterwards, because you have existing anchors of safety to return to.
Neurologically, it affects specific parts of the brain, right?
The amygdala, the emotion center gets overactive, the hippocampus for memory can actually shrink a bit, and the prefrontal cortex for reasoning and control gets less effective.
Wow. So that leads to fragmented memories, trouble managing emotions, feeling stuck, development stalling, being physically jumpy.
All of that.
Yeah.
But the crucial thing is that fight or flight state isn't meant to be permanent. Recovery is all about restoring that feeling of safety.
Specifically where the trauma happened.
Ideally, yes. The source warns against trying to compensate elsewhere. Like if you had relationship trauma, throwing yourself into work might feel productive, but it doesn't heal the core wound related to trust and connection.
So you need to rebuild safety in relationships if that's where the trauma was, or in finances if it was money related, and so on.
Precisely. Trauma changes the brain state. Recreating safety is how you help it return to normal functioning.
Okay. Now let's talk about that email inbox analogy for emotions. That felt very 21st century.
Huh. Yeah, it's relatable, isn't it? Emotions pile up like unread emails.
If you ignore them completely, you miss important messages, but you can't realistically stop and analyze every single one the second it arrives either.
Exactly. And the source is clear. Emotions aren't optional. We will feel them. If we try to suppress them, through numbing, distraction, projection, just tensing up.
They just build up, right? That backlog gets bigger.
And eventually, it forces its way out somehow.
Yeah.
Because emotions aren't just thoughts. They have a physical component, a motor component, the source calls it. Tiny muscle activations.
Ah, so that's why unfelt stuff gets embodied, like literally held in the body.
Seems so. That gut feeling, the heartache, feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders, a pain in the neck. These aren't just metaphors. The body holds that tension.
So how do we clear the inbox? Deal with the backlog? The source had practical tips, starting with meditation.
Yes, but meditation focused on allowing, not forcing, not trying to stop feeling, but just sitting with whatever comes up, observing it without reacting, letting it pass through.
Non-judgmental awareness.
Right. Then there were breath scans. Breathing slowly and noticing any snags or tightness, areas holding tension.
And journaling about those sensations, trying to understand the body's symbolic language.
And, crucially, physical release. Sweat. Move your body. Cry if you need to cry. Let yourself feel awful sometimes if that's what's there.
Permission to feel like rubbish.
Basically, emotional health isn't about being happy all the time. It's about feeling the full range without getting permanently stuck. Just like mental health is maybe about seeing your thoughts without having to be them or react instantly.
Okay, this leads us to the nature of healing itself. The source makes a really important distinction here.
Yeah, it's not like fixing a broken bone, is it? Healing the mind isn't about patching things up to get back to how you were. It's more like becoming someone new entirely.
And that process is often uncomfortable, disruptive.
Very often, yes.
Yeah.
The source describes healing as a return to our natural state, freedom, creativity, fearlessness, love. But getting there means facing the uncomfortable stuff.
A real self-inventory, grudges, longings, fears.
All of it. Fully feeling and expressing the emotions you cut off, facing the inner darkness to find real freedom and peace. But, and this is vital, the suffering isn't permanent.
It's not about becoming the person you were before you got hurt. That person is gone, in a way.
Right. It's about adapting, evolving. The source calls it positive disintegration, a healthy breakdown and rebuilding of your self-concept. It's building the right life, step by step.
Choosing the discomfort of growth over the discomfort of staying stuck.
Exactly. That's the core choice. Healing starts when you're willing to feel what you're afraid of feeling. Becoming your best self isn't about striving for some impossible goal. It's about removing the fears that hold back what's already naturally yours.
So it's not about being naive again. It's about becoming more resilient, more
More
self-sufficient.
empowered, yeah. Taking control of what you can control, your actions, your choices, instead of obsessing over what you can't. Healing makes you stronger where you were broken, more grounded, more responsible, often more empathetic too.
And it contrasts ineffective coping like worry and fear.
With effective action, like preparing, understanding, doing something about it.
Mm.
Holding on to fear doesn't keep you safe. It just stops you from living now.
True healing means you stop tolerating the discomfort. You actually do something.
Yeah, you prioritize the quality of your life right now. You address what's stopping you from enjoying the present. Even if the present is hard, resisting it just means you won't enjoy the good times when they come either. Healing is valuing your life, basically.
Okay, final point. Moving forward isn't about revenge, is it? That whole glow up thing.
Ah, the glow up. The source has a really good take on this. A real glow up isn't about looking good to prove haters wrong. It's internal.
It's feeling content inside, hopeful for your own future.
Exactly. It distinguishes between changing your appearance to impress others versus a genuine inner shift where you feel fundamentally better about yourself and your life.
And people overly focused on showing everyone how great they are. Maybe they're still feeling insecure underneath.
Often, yes. The real transformation isn't about external validation. It's about the internal gains. Self-respect, real connections, emotional freedom, mental clarity, stuff you can't always photograph.
Life isn't a before and after photo, it's constant shedding and becoming.
Right. That moment you imagine where everyone sees how amazing you are now, that's mostly a game you're playing in your own head. Other people are mostly thinking about themselves.
So the only person you really need to impress is yourself, meeting your own expectations.
Pretty much. The source wraps up by asking us to look at why we still crave that external pat on the back for our growth. Maybe it's because we haven't fully given it to ourselves yet.
Wow. Okay. So, wrapping this all up, the big takeaway seems to be releasing the past isn't about forcing yourself to forget or forgive on command. It's way more about building a new present.
Yeah, and understanding your emotional responses, accepting them, shifting your perspective on what happened, rather than just trying to bulldoze over it.
True healing is internal, self-awareness, feeling your feelings, focusing on your well-being now instead of looking outward for approval or staying stuck looking backward.
Couldn't have said it better. It's an inside job.
Right. So a final thought for everyone listening. What's maybe one small thing, one tiny step you could take today? Either towards building that new life or just towards acknowledging one feeling you've been pushing away.
Hmm. Because it's often in those small, consistent steps that the real journey unfolds, isn't it?
Exactly. Something to think about.